And keep your applause going now for Joe Charnitski. Come on up, Joe. There's Joe. Hey, how are you?
So I was about 12 years old in my bedroom on the second floor of my parents' house when I heard the thud. I ran out to the hallway to see what happened. My mom was bounding up the stairs, probably assuming something happened to me. We stared at each other for a second, unsure, and then we heard the moans of my grandfather down the hall in the attic stairway. As my grandfather advanced into his 70s, senility had begun to set in, and my mom and dad took a more active role in looking out for him because we lived on the same street. And on this day, he was visiting us, watching TV in the living room. My mom was finishing dinner in the kitchen. My dad was at work. He went upstairs to use the bathroom, and instead of going back downstairs to the living room after he was done, in his confused state, he went up the dark, narrow attic stairway. He slipped and hit his head so hard on the solid wooden steps that one of them broke. He had a pretty severe head wound, the kind the 13-year-old, 12-year-old version of me had never seen before. But he was conscious, and we called an ambulance, and he would be fine, but taking care of him was no longer an option for my mom and dad. So my grandfather would spend the balance of his life, some 7 or 8 years, in a nursing home nearby. My dad would visit him every day, and if he couldn't make it, he made sure that my mom or I or somebody showed up. Even after my grandfather stopped communicating verbally, even after all you got from him when you walked in was this sort of vague, empty smile, I don't think it was out of recognition. Still, my dad thought it was important someone be there every day. I would visit my grandfather, not often, not enough, but I do remember going one time, and I went into the common room where he'd be sitting in his wheelchair, and I approached him for a handshake. It was still a good handshake. Physically, he was very healthy, and he gave me that smile. But this time, another resident who was nearby yelled over, "I bet you think he doesn't know who you are. You think he doesn't know you're here. But he does. He can. And he appreciates it." And I looked at my grandfather, and I really wanted that to be true. Although I'm not sure that it was, but I was grateful for this guy for saying it. When I got the call from my dad that my grandfather had passed away, I was now 20 years old, living in New York City, a student at NYU. I wasn't surprised. He had been sick. Doctors had prepared my dad for this eventuality, but still, I guess I felt I had to consider the passing of my grandfather. So I went to the roof of my East Village apartment building, and I paced around, and I thought about my name. You see, my name is Joe Charnitski, and my dad's name was Joe Charnitski, and my grandfather's name was Joe Charnitski, and his father's name was Joe Charnitski. His father was the immigrant who came from Slovakia across the ocean. That ocean, I could kind of see it from the roof of the apartment building where I was standing. He came here, for a better life for his son, Joe Charnitski, who got some kind of education. He had to quit school in middle school to go work in the coal mines of Pennsylvania to support his family. But eventually, someday, he owned a small business in town, and he was able to create a life for his son, Joe Charnitski, in which he could graduate high school and get a nice, stable civil service job in the state of Pennsylvania and meet a nice girl and buy a house and have a son, Joe Charnitski, who was now on top of the world in New York City with the giants of Manhattan looking over me, Citicorp and Chrysler and Empire, and back then, Towers. A student at New York University, nothing but opportunity ahead of him. And I got it. I felt the connection to the immigrant story. I felt a pride I hadn't ever felt before, and a gratitude I hadn't ever felt before, and a love for the name Joe Charnitski I had never felt before. And I told that story, the story of my name, when I gave the eulogy at my grandfather's funeral a few days later. Yes, I gave the eulogy at Joe Charnitski's funeral. It's a little creepy. I'm more than twice as old now as I was then. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father have passed. I'm the last of the Joe Charnitskis. I don't have a son, a situation that is trending from not yet to not likely a little bit more every day. And that sometimes makes me feel like my life is the end of something. It has the potential to make me a little sad, like every generation before me has been building one step at a time, a platform upon which the next generation could go a little further, and my step is broken. It's important to know your roots. I like knowing where I've come from, but where am I going? Right? Who do I share this legacy with? It might be why I tell these stories. So thanks.